Welcome, class, and this is online lecture number 4. And today we're going to be talking about the deconstruction of video, starting to consider video from its most basic component, and then working our way back up to what you would call a deliberate or cogent montage. And that's something that we'll be considering, quite honestly, for the rest of the semester, a cogent montage. So let's talk about and consider the idea of deconstructing video. So class, when we consider the deconstruction of video continuity, I always like to kind of use the analogy of say for example, if this was a physics class, maybe an introduction to physics, and we were deconstructing matter, you would want to start with the smallest particle, the smallest component of matter, and that would basically be kind of looking inside an atom. And of course, if you could look inside an atom, you would see that an atom has a nucleus, and then there are electrons and protons revolving around that nucleus. Well, when we consider video and video continuity, you can say that your most basic component is the shot, is the frame. One frame of video or one frame of film. Of course, we don't use a lot of film anymore, but that's pretty much your basic component when it comes to video, and then you kind of build from there. And so the first thing I always like to say that regardless of what you learn in this class, and regardless of what you learn in COM 429, that this is the one thing that I do want you to remember, and it will be on your very first quiz coming up in a few weeks. And that is this, that there are 30 frames, I repeat, there are 30 frames, F-R-A-M-E-S, there are 30 frames in a second, and that would be in SD or standard definition video. In high definition video, also known as HD, there are 60 frames in a second. So again, in standard definition video, there are 30 frames per second. In high definition video, there are 60 frames per second. And that pretty much gets us on the way, gets us started in terms of, as I was saying, considering how you can deconstruct or indeed build from that level back up until you're talking about sequences and montages. And you notice that if you went onto Blackboard, I provided an outline for this lecture, and it should be titled Outline for lecture number 4. And you'll notice that the first item is the focal length, and that's whether it's a long shot, a medium shot, or a close-up, and then we'll move on from there. So you'll notice that when it comes to a long shot, and you'll see that here if you're looking at the screen, you'll see that I've got this billboard that says that what's going to come up is a long shot. And I'm going to give you a little background on this video. I'm going to actually roll it so you can see what we're talking about. Boom. So this is our long shot, and a little background on this video. This is actual news footage from December 24th, 2014. And of course, in 2014, if you remember, in August of 2014, Donald Brown was killed by a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri. And so fast forward almost to the day, I think that incident occurred on August 14th of 2014. And so, 4 months and 14 days later, 10 days later, this incident occurred, and it was somewhat similar circumstances that caused this group of people to kind of just gather here. You can see police, and it looks like just folks from the community. And what had happened in this particular incident that we're looking at was that there had been a young man similar to Mr. Brown, to Donald, who had allegedly held up this convenience store. You can see the gasoline tower over to your right there, dispenser, gasoline pump. And supposedly a young man had tried to rob this service station or this convenience store, and he was apprehended, or the police confronted him, and they killed him. They shot. They said he had a gun, and then the police officers shot him. So you can imagine, after 4 months and all of the controversy and the turmoil that Donald Brown's murder caused, you can imagine that the folks in this community kind of thought that it was something very similar. This particular community is just a few miles from Ferguson. It's another suburb of the greater St. Louis metropolitan area. So here's, I'm going to play it a little bit. So what's happened is that we've had a professional videographer from one of the local stations come on the scene, and he's already rolling his camera. And I'm going to pause. Let me take it back. He'd already been rolling his camera prior to him getting right on the scene. As you can see, I'm going to pause it again. And so this is a wide shot or a long shot. And we use the long shot as an establishment shot. You can imagine that, and you'll see the final product, because I actually did turn this footage into an actual news story for ABC News, and you'll see the final product in a little while. But you can imagine that if you were home and you were about to view this reporter package, this would probably be a shot that you would want to open with, because it kind of gives you a sense of the entire scene. It kind of establishes the fact that there's clearly a lot of people that have amassed, and that that there's clearly some type of disturbance. You can see the police in the foreground, and that's a good way to kind of get you to start thinking about the fact that when you look at this shot, you'll see that, again, there's a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. A foreground, a middle ground, and a background. And that's a very important concept. And you'll see, certainly when it comes to cinema, filmmaking from the standpoint of theatrical films, certainly, a director and certainly the cinematographer, the professional that's in charge of the camera, in charge of what you capture with the camera, and the cinematographer works in conjunction with the director and also a producer on when a film is being made. So the cinematographer is using that space, if you will, and if you imagine that, from a two-dimensional standpoint, you have a horizontal x-axis, you have a vertical y-axis. Those are obviously your two obvious dimensions. But when you start talking about a foreground, a middle ground, and a background, you also have the Z dimension. You can look into that frame, and you can manipulate that frame. And we'll be talking about that later when we start talking about cinema and cinema, film composition. I should say film continuity. We'll be talking about how you manipulate the entire frame from the standpoint of foreground, middle ground, and background. So this is a long shot. Again, not you can't quite make out faces. And this is standard definition video, so that it's not the greatest resolution. But again, with a long shot, you tend not to be able to discern a lot of detail. And again, it's used primarily to kind of establish, a sense of a relationship. Where are we? What's going on from that standpoint, or from a standpoint of you kind of familiarizing yourself with the setting. So let's look at what the other thing I want you to notice was that I didn't record sound with this shot, and not having sound associated with video makes a really big difference. Of course, fortunately, most video is associated with sound. That leads me to another concept that I want you to really take note. And again, it will be on, I think will be on your, maybe your second lecture quiz, is that the most basic juxtaposition is image to sound. And that's pretty much how we experience video continuity, is that we are always, in a sense, analyzing what we hear in relationship to what we see. Again, the most basic juxtaposition is image to sound. So let's kind of look at what a medium shot would look like. So notice here, I'm just going to pause the slate. Notice that what does TRT stand for? TRT stands for total running time, which means that this particular sequence or shot is actually 11 seconds and 15 frames. And remember, that would be so that 15 would make up a half a second, because there are how many frames in a second? There are 30 frames in a second when we talk about standard definition video, which this is. So here's the middle shot, again with no audio. But notice in the middle, I'm sorry, I said middle, I meant medium shot. So this is a medium shot. And notice with a medium shot, now we can see some detail. We're beginning to see the police officer's face. We can that to the right, the police officer that's kind of towards the 2/3 of going from left to right, the 2/3 in across the frame there. That's looking directly at us. That looks like it's a female, and of course this gentleman here that's a little closer in the foreground. I can almost see his insignia on his that's his left shoulder. So again, with a medium shot, you're beginning to see more detail. You're beginning to be able to kind of discern specific objects or things that are associated with a particular character. What they have on, maybe some distinguishing facial feature or something like that. Again, no video, no audio. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about a lot in this class from the standpoint of audio juxtaposed to video is that as long as that there isn't any lip sync, and lip sync is when you've got a person on camera and they're actually talking, so obviously their lips are moving, unless they have a mask on or something like that. That would involve lip sync. As long as there's no lip sync involved, you can pretty much, and I want you to treat and consider the audio to be completely different from the video. Those are two mediums, video and audio, that can be considered, that can be processed, that can be dealt with in a totally different fashion, as long as there's no lip sync associated with the image. Why? Because that means that you can, for example, with this, we've got this kind of, you might say, a disturbance going on. You might call it an urban disturbance. We might want to put music under it, maybe NWA, something like that would kind of set the scene and kind of create that tension in terms of if we were presenting this to an audience, maybe from a cinematic standpoint or some kind of dramatic TV show, we would put that type of music under under the scene. We could transpose maybe again this scene. I intentionally left this scene without I recorded it without any sound, but again I could find some natural sound of a disturbance from somewhere else and put that sound under this shot. So again, you can completely deal with audio completely separate from the video. So this is a medium shot. So let's go on to a close-up. And and you'll notice in the close-up that I've actually slowed it down, which is something else that you can do to manipulate a video image, is to slow it down. See here, I've slowed it down. Again, I'm just going to pause it for a second. Again, now you can see this is not an extreme close-up, but it is a close-up. You can see, you can really see details in the face. You can almost, if there was someone in this particular image, or this frame, I should say, that you knew, you would probably recognize them. you know, because there's enough detail on the face. Maybe it might be a little blurred because I've captured, I'm in the motion, but I can see if I can, and I did slow it down. So, you know, depending on what frame I stop it on, gives you a little more resolution. But again, there's more of an emotional investment when you're looking at a close-up, and you can see why, in terms of storytelling, you would want to use the three options. You know, your long shot, your medium shot, and your close-up, depending on what it is you're trying to say, you know, or convey at any given moment, and in terms of your video presentation. The other thing that I want you to become aware of is that there are basically two types of pacing. There's internal pacing, and we'll be talking a lot about internal pacing, and there's external pacing. And as a matter of fact, we talked about internal pacing. Internal pacing is one of your terms on your lexicon list, and of course that is that's online lecture number 3. This is online lecture number 4. So, the definition of internal pacing, and you might have your lexicon list there. You can, if you want to refer to it. The definition of internal pacing is the level of activity within the frame. And of course, you can kind of use a scale if you want, from the standpoint of a lot of activity going on in the frame to no activity going on in the frame. So of course, when I play this, even though I did slow this down, just by the mere fact that there are so many different people in the frame, indicates that there's a fair level. There's a high level of internal pacing, or I should say that the internal pacing for this particular shot would be fairly high. And the other thing that I want you to remember about internal pacing is that from the standpoint of you being an editor or you being a producer, as it were, in a post-production scenario, meaning after the initial video or film has been shot, you do not have control over the internal pacing, and that will be, I know that's a question that will be on your midterm exam. Again, I repeat, you do not have control over the internal pacing of a shot or a frame. You have, because you weren't there when it was shot. So if this was something that was being simulated, if this was, just a fictional type of setting, or we're setting this scene or doing this scene for a fictional film, a theatrical film, and the director said, okay, I want a lot of extras, and I want the principals, and maybe the story kind of revolves around the police, so one of the police officers is a known actor, and everybody else might be extras. The director, he or she has set the tone. They've decided that that's the kind of narrative they want in terms of telling the story. So you coming in after the fact as an editor, you don't have control over that, except for the fact what you might be able to electronically manipulate this frame. You could pull it in, you could distort it slightly, but again, that would be after the fact, and that would be again, from an electronics or a digital standpoint, that wouldn't be some natural manipulation. But when we think about external pacing, and the definition of external pacing is the duration of each frame, or the duration of each shot. Then you can appreciate that as an editor, someone that's getting involved in a post-production scenario, you do have control over the external pacing. Why? Because you can control, and the duration of the shot. We were talking about the number of frames in something we'll be going back to quite a bit in this class. We were talking about the number of frames in 1 second. How many frames of video are there in a second? Well, again, there are 30 frames in a second, which means that you can manipulate from a digital editing standpoint, and that's what we're talking about. From a digital editing standpoint, you can manipulate that frame down to 1/30th of a second, which is a pretty small increment. from a time standpoint, certainly. And if it's high definition video and the video's been recorded at 60 frames per second, that means that you can manipulate that in a post-production situation. You can manipulate that down to 1/60th of a frame. So again, I just want you to remember that you do have control over the external pacing. You don't have control over the internal pacing unless you're going to electronically or digitally manipulate the screen. But there's a relationship, as you could probably start realizing, there's a relationship between the internal pacing and the external pacing. It's almost like if we were thinking about music, it's like the relationship between melody and harmony. That you can have a melody that is at one time signature, and then you could have a harmony that's at another time signature if you wanted to kind of create that type of tension in terms of a musical composition. Well, you can pretty much do the same thing not pretty much, you can do the same thing with video. You can, for example, I could have all these people kind of just frozen. I remember, a few years ago, that was kind of a popular thing people were doing. I forget what they called that, posing or whatever. And so I could have everybody in this shot posing, and it would mean that it would take down the internal pacing, it would take down the internal energy. But if I was using just a short duration from the standpoint of the external pacing, if I was just kind of keeping each shot at say 1 second and featuring different people in that shot, or just kind of featuring different angles, so you were seeing individuals from a different angle, I could raise the external pacing. Why? Because I'm featuring a lot of shots, but at a short duration. So I'm giving you a shot that might be 1 second, but I'm giving you 10 different shots, and that's certainly going to increase the external pacing in relationship to the external pacing. So class, now we've seen the 3 shots that were a long shot, a middle shot, a medium shot, and a close-up. But those 3 shots in that sequence, in the first sequence, they did not have audio. So let's look now at the same 3 shots for briefly, but now these shots I've actually recorded, along with the video, I've actually recorded the nat sound. So you notice right away that, and I'll just take it back. You notice right away that when you introduce that sound, when you introduce the audio, it really makes a difference. I mean, there's almost an instant kind of greater level of emotional investment, if you will, by the sense that you can kind of by the fact that you can hear people talking, and you really get a much better sense of the level of emotion and anger, if you will, and the mood of that particular scene, of that particular scenario, just by hearing that audio. And I always like to say that the dirty little secret in media is that television is still radio with pictures. That we still really reference so much of our media of the media that we experience on a daily basis. We still reference that media by the audio. And as Homo sapiens, we over the eons, as it were, as we've evolved as an animal, and that's what Homo sapien is. We're animals. We're just high order animals, that our hearing is probably evolved even greater, to a greater extent than our vision. Our vision is okay, but our audio capacity, I should say, our oral capacity, our ability to hear sounds, is probably at least 100 times greater than our ability to see images. Of course. And as you know, from a standpoint of getting older and having our sensory, our senses, start failing as we get older, your sight is probably going to go before your hearing. So indeed you could be a young person and need to wear glasses, even though, and that doesn't happen too often. Of course, there are people that have problems and lose their hearing, unfortunately, but not probably as much as people's vision will deteriorate. So again, audio is very important. The story is really told through audio, and it certainly makes a difference. When you have a video image and have the accompanying audio. So this next shot again is that medium shot again with audio. And just by the fact, I'm gonna pause it briefly. Just by the fact that again it's a medium shot. We've got greater detail in terms we can actually see faces. We could see a better sense of what's going on. And then when you add the audio to that, again, it's just automatic that there's a greater level of emotional, indeed even intellectual investment from the standpoint of the viewer. You subconsciously start making opinions about what you're seeing and what you're seeing, and perhaps more importantly, and this is something that we'll be talking a lot about in this class, again, that sense of that, or that concept or the idea of the juxtaposition. And what I said that the most basic juxtaposition is image to sound. And again, is that idea of not just being able to see it or not just being able to hear it, but having those two mediums, the audio and the video, kind of collide, if you will, kind of come together. And it's that combination, if you will. It's almost as if those are two parents, and when they come together and conceive, what is that conception? A new idea. And where is that new idea? In the mind of the viewer. And that's why the juxtaposition of image to sound is so important, because it's really at the core of what we do. It's at the core of how we experience media. Is that these two separate entities, the audio and the video, coming together as an experience through our senses, and us creating, having an emotional, indeed, and perhaps an intellectual response as a result of the collision of those two entities. And sometimes those two entities can be, the sound can be very different than what you're seeing, and vice versa. And so it just creates a greater level of, you might say, emotional or intellectual tension by how different those two different elements can be. So now I'm going to take it down. So this is our medium shot. I'll let the close-up come in. So this is the close-up again. This is a close-up where I've actually slowed the video down. And again, you can see just by the introduction of that audio, again, it gives you a different emotional feel. And certainly by the fact that I have manipulated the internal frame by the fact that I slowed that video down. And that's a good example of how you can electronically manipulate a frame after the fact, is by the fact that you can slow video down. You don't have control over the internal pacing from the standpoint of it being a raw video or a natural occurrence, but in a post-production situation, you're able to manipulate it from in an electronic fashion. So now the next thing that we're going to be talking about is the types. If you look at your lecture outline, is the types of sequences. And we're kind of getting to the point where we're going to be talking about what you might call a cogent sequence in a few moments. But now this type of feed, and again, this is video that I actually used at ABC when I was freelancing after I had retired from ABC. I freelanced with them for quite a few years. And I actually did this story one morning. I think I had to be at work by 2 a.m. And this was the story that we were going to be doing that particular morning. And you don't get an opportunity to kind of, that previous evening know what kind of story you're going to be working on the next morning. You just basically hit it cold, and that's what an experienced editor has to do. You have to kind of encounter a project, encounter a situation without a lot of forewarning, and just be able to kind of intuitively know what has to happen. So this is raw. This is how the raw video came in. Notice that the raw video feed, the TRT again, was 2 minutes and 45 seconds. I want to show you that, and this is the actual professional billboard. This is the service. NSS is a network news service, and so this is how it came into me. This is the billboard that I first saw when using optical transmission, fiber optic link. Sometimes it could be a satellite link. Sometimes it could be a microwave link. And now in 2020, because of our ability to stream video over the internet, a lot of times it's a video link. I should say it's an internet link in terms of how you receive video. But the way that this comes in, and you'll see in a moment, it's just a random sequence of video, of shots from that particular incident there out in the suburb of St. Louis. So when we look at this billboard here, though, we see that there's the slug. Again, we're kind of looking at it from a news production standpoint. So that's what we title a story. A story is slugged. And so the slug of this story is shooting in Missouri. Of course, MO is the abbreviation for Missouri. And so you get a little kind of a headline, if you will, something that kind of gives you, you use that as a tool in terms of being able to write what we call a lead, L-E-A-D. So that would be your lead, that protesters are fighting police. So then we have the source, and notice that it says KTVI, which means that, and of course, we always have that K as the first letter in a broadcast call letters when it's west of the Mississippi. If this was a broadcast entity, a broadcast station that was east of the Mississippi, there would be a W at the beginning of the call letters. So KTVI indicates that that's probably a TV station out there in St. Louis, and it's a Fox affiliated station. Of course, we have basically four networks that do news, broadcast networks, and that would be Fox, NBC, CBS, and of course the one I worked for a long time, ABC. And it tells us that, then it says that there, so it says Midwest embargo, and embargo means that those two stations, KMOV and KDNL, those are the two stations that can, for some reason, they cannot use this material. They cannot use this video. Maybe they're not part of the network news service. Maybe they didn't pay their bill. Maybe they're just competitors in this particular market, and so that a Fox affiliate doesn't want them to have it. But for some reason, they are not allowed, unless they get special permission. They simply cannot just take this feed and use this video of this story. And of course, again, you see that that's that time code where you have the 000245 and 12. You've had a homework involving time code, and so that's the time code and designation or indication. And it's indeed, it tells you that, again, that the duration is 2 minutes, 45 seconds, and 12 frames. And then, of course, there's the record date, and it was Christmas Eve, December 24th of 24. And again, that VO stands for voiceover, meaning that if you were not going to turn this into a reporter package, that this would be voiceover material. You could turn it into a story where you've got copy, but you're just going to play this over the anchor being on the set reading copy. So let's look at what this video looks like in what you might say is raw state. So there we have obviously there's been audio recorded with it. Again, it's just a random sequence of shots. I'm just going to pause it for a second. So we would call this a utility feed, and meaning that there's no kind of cogent or deliberate sequencing of the shots. There's no editorial purpose behind how it's being presented here. It's simply being presented here in a way that, again, is just a random sequence of shots in order to be able to get it distributed to whatever users needs it across the country. Whatever news stations, whatever news organizations needs this video, this is how they receive it. So we would call this a raw feed or a utilitarian or utility sequencing, a utility feed, meaning that it's got a utility purpose. Notice that sometimes the audio might drop out. Now it's resumed. So what am I doing now as an editor? If I'm going to be doing this story, I'm going to be editing this story. I'm looking for shots. I'm looking and keeping in mind that I'm going to pause it because I want to point out what's going on here. And when I'm from the standpoint of me looking at this video for the first time on that particular morning, December 24th, 2014. Again, I don't have a lot of time to sit there and log this video. So another concept that I want you to remember, and there will be a question on your first lecture quiz, and that is that media management is very important. And so what do we mean by media management? So obviously this is video that is coming in digitally via, internet or via a fiber optic link, via satellite. It's being recorded onto record servers at a particular broadcast facility. Of course, in my situation, it was being recorded on record servers at ABC News in downtown Washington, and which means that that's the only place it exists. And so I have to know if there's a particular shot that I want to use, I have to know exactly where that shot resides within that feed, which is on my digital platform, which is my edit platform, in terms of where I brought this video clip that had been recorded on a record server. It's then turned into obviously a digital file, a video file, and then I go into the library, you might say, and pull that file into my browser, via a local area, an LAN, a local area network. So once it gets into my edit platform, I'm the only one that knows where a particular clip is. And so again, that's why media management is so important, because you're going to have to come up with a management tool. Now, most nonlinear, I should say all nonlinear edit applications will provide some type of tool set. They'll provide markers. You can actually even have these little bubbles where you can type in a designation. You could kind of identify a clip, and then once you kind of put your mouse on that point, the little bubble comes up with whatever you've written, however you've labeled that particular shot. That's a great convenience. That really helps a lot. You can get colored markers. I had a system at ABC where I would, like a shot like this, I might use a red marker just to indicate that, okay, it's a pretty decent shot. I'm probably going to use it. If I used a blue marker, a blue dot, and that would indicate to me that was an actual audio endpoint, probably for a sound bite. And so it was an audio INQ. And then of course I would go down, and once I determined where the out cue would be, then I would put a yellow dot. So when I laid that clip with the blue marker and the yellow marker on a timeline, I didn't have to listen to the audio to determine where the audio in cue was or where the audio out cue was. I had already done that by using these two colored markers. So again, that was my approach, my way of doing media management. And you're going to find that every editor, every professional working in media, certainly in that kind of deadline situation where you have to really put together a package, put together a story, in a very short fashion, you're going to come up with some type of some system in terms of being able to manage your media. So again, media management is very important. The reason why I wanted to highlight, I'm just going to take it back. Oh, it's the same shot sequence, so I can still use this shot. Notice that what's going on here was that apparently this was another store or the same convenience store. Now, as a result of people coming on the scene, there are some people that are apparently actually looting. But notice that, you know, for some reason, there's no audio associated with this particular shot. Well, but again, as we said earlier in the lecture, as long as there's no lip sync involved, as long as you cannot see anyone's lips moving, and obviously you can't hear them talking, I can use any audio here I want. So what I would do? I would do what we call transposition, and that's transposition, transposition. I would transpose, which is I guess the past tense. I would transpose audio to this particular shot if I wanted to use it on my timeline. And you should feel comfortable doing that. You know, you might want to put, again, for some reason, artistic or aesthetic reason, you might want to put music under this shot. And for my purposes, in terms of featuring this shot in the story narrative, the reporters, and you'll see this in the final version, the reporter is probably going to talk about the fact that there might have been some minor looting going on. And so what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to put some audio under this shot, and it's going to be the audio that you would be associated with what's going on anyway, and it's just going to be crowd noise. So again, that is something that you certainly should feel comfortable doing, being able to transpose audio when it's needed. So class, if you look at the bottom of your lecture outline, you'll notice that what we were watching previously was the raw feed, and we call that a utility sequence. Now, what we're going to be watching coming up now is actually, now we're talking about montage, or a cogent montage, and quite honestly, for the rest of the semester, that's what we're going to be dealing with. We're going to be dealing with sequencing shots, creating a montage where which is cogent, meaning what? Meaning that the shot selection is very deliberate. Now I'm really trying to tell a story. I'm really trying to persuade the viewer. I'm trying to elicit an emotional response. I'm trying to elicit an intellectual response by a very deliberate sequencing of shots, where I am spending time thinking about why I'm using each shot and why I'm putting it in a certain sequence. And again, I always like to say that one of the main purposes for this class, or one of the main things that you're going to hopefully kind of get accustomed to, is decision making in real time, making decisions in real time. You've heard me say before that video is a language, and once you understand the language, then you're able to, as it were, write with that language, use that language to communicate. And that's exactly what we're learning to do here. What we're starting to do here is to use video as a language. And so now all of the sequences, I should say the images that we'll be watching are going to be contained within a montage. And again, I am deliberately selecting the shots. I am deliberately selecting the sequence of the shots in order to convey a very specific idea from an emotional standpoint, and from an intellectual standpoint. So this next sequence is going to be the opening voiceover from the reporter, who you'll be seeing in a few moments, and this is the beginning of the reporter package that she wrote and that I edited. She, that morning of the 24th of December 2014, she probably got to work even before I did. I think her first name was Susan. She started writing this story about this disturbance there in the suburbs of Missouri. I came in, as I said, maybe an hour or so later. I started watching the video, kind of, just doing a very quick, very kind of casual logging of the video more from in my own mind than actually writing shots, locations down. And so now because I have her voiceover, I can start putting very specific shots over her voiceover at the right moment in order to create, again, a cogent montage, which is a deliberate montage, a very kind of specific way of telling a story. So let's look at that.
Another burst of violence on the streets of suburban St. Louis last night, and more discord between the community and the police. This time in the city of Berkeley, Missouri, where hundreds of protesters gathered at the spot where a white police officer fatally shot a black teenager.
So, in that one, again, she had a voiceover, and I think what you immediately kind of remember. And I'm just going to take it back again. So now that you've seen it once, and now you can kind of look at it from a more critical standpoint. But now, because it's a deliberate sequence. Again, what's the most important thing going on? The juxtaposition of image to sound. Now it's not just simply that random what we call BG or background sound associated with any one of those shots. It's her voice. It's her written. She's written that. It's her script. It's her voiceover in juxtaposed to a very specific shot. Again, now we're talking about a sophisticated, if you will, montage. Again, a cogent montage. So not this time when I play it back, I want you to kind of really soak in the juxtaposition of what she's saying to what you're seeing, and kind of think about what kind of response are you getting from that like a subliminal, subconscious level.
Another burst of violence on the streets of suburban St. Louis last night, and more discord between the community and the police. This time in the city of Berkeley, Missouri, where hundreds of protesters gathered at the spot where a white police officer fatally shot a black teenager.
Again, a very deliberate. The only thing I did not use the background sound, and that's something that we'll be talking a lot about. Again, I think we've already talked about the fact that you have primary audio, and the primary audio, obviously, in that situation, would be her voice and her voiceover. And then if there was going to be background sound, and I did feature the background sound in the actual final product, and the background sound would be the natural sound associated with that scenario, which would be people kind of yelling, and the noise that you would associate with that type of disturbance, people kind of protesting. So now what we're going to be watching next is the entire package. And notice again, so NWO stands for the unit at ABC that I was working for. That stands for News One. The 16:9 is the aspect ratio. So we presented this to our network affiliates with a 16:9 aspect ratio, and we'll be talking about aspect ratio. Her name is Susan Saulney. And that was the writer, my longtime friend and colleague, Myra Green, and those are my initials right there. So that's the slug, the story slug, was Missouri shooting, and I said this was a 2 a.m. It wasn't a 2 a.m. I had actually come in about 9:45 because we had to get this done by 11 a.m. and that was the time that we pretty much fed it, was by 11 a.m. So I had less than an hour. I got in about 9:45, and I had, by 11 a.m., I had to be feeding this, or, I had to be getting it on to the network distribution line. That was the date. It was Christmas Eve of 2014. And again, what does TRT stand for? Total running time, which was 1 minute and 33 seconds. So now again, this is the total package. Again, a very cogent montage, a very deliberate montage, and a montage that is certainly associated with a juxtaposition of image to sound. Her track vis-a-vis what you're seeing visually.
Anger erupting on the streets of suburban St. Louis again last night.
So notice here, I've actually, now this is the package. and I'm actually, I included the background sound, and it, again, there's that juxtaposition of what she's saying, juxtaposed to what you're seeing, and also juxtaposed to what? That secondary audio, which really creates the scene. It really gives you a sense of the level of energy associated, indeed the anger and all the emotion associated with this particular scenario. Again, and so using background sound is very important.
This time in the city of Berkeley, Missouri, where hundreds of protesters gathered at the spot where a white police officer fatally shot a black teenager.
Boom. So here I'm using natural sound. I had, apparently this was an explosion of a smoke bomb or some type of device like that. I think the police set that up. Maybe they didn't. But again, when you have the opportunity to kind of, feature that type of situation, or I should say event, within this general overall scenario, you should by all means do it. I mean, if the story, more or less calls for it, or if the story allows it, in this case, it certainly did. So again, and notice how that just came up. I didn't change the scene. It just came up from the standpoint of me backing or back timing that event to kind of be timed to when Susan's track ended that moment. So we call that a back time, and that is something that we'll be talking about.
Berkeley police say the officer was conducting a routine check of a theft report at a gas station when the teenager pointed a gun at him. Police released video captured outside the gas station during the incident.
Now here, one of the terms on your lexicon list 1, was the concept of repertoire. And a repertoire is a set of skills that you have to develop for a certain discipline. If you're a dancer, you have to have a repertoire. If you're a musician, you have you have to have a repertoire of being able to play an instrument in a certain way. If you want to be a sessions musician, somebody that plays for a lot of different artists in a lot of different types of situations. So as an editor, certainly as an editor in a broadcast news situation, there are certain devices, certain protocols, if you will, that you have to know how to do. There's certain things you have to know how to do with the video, and this is one of them. So up to this point, all of the video that we had been watching had come from a professional videographer, from a news photographer there in St. Louis. But this is the black and white video. This is surveillance video from this particular convenience store on that night. And so we know what surveillance video means. Now, of course, now and maybe even in 2014, we have better surveillance cameras. Now, of course, you can have surveillance cameras that are 1080 HD video, even 4K HD video, even in a surveillance camera. This camera looks though pretty low res, and again it's shot at night. It was shot at night, and so supposedly we're actually watching this young man be shot by the police because we're supposed to see the gun there in his hand. And I think this person that's in the foreground, I think they just happened to be going to the store at that time. I don't think they were actually involved. They just happened to be a witness. So we have a kind of a real moment here. And so from the standpoint of us trying to assist the viewer in being able to see what's going on in this video, we do what we call a highlight. And this has to be part of your repertoire if you want to be a news editor, meaning that what we're going to take advantage of the fact that, and certainly in nonlinear video platforms, nonlinear video applications, we always have multiple channels of video. So on one channel of video, I'm just taking this shot the way it was originally shot, and then I'm on a second channel of video, I'm going to take the same shot, but I'm just going to raise the luminance level. I'm just going to kind of make it a little brighter. And then so now when I go from one video channel to the next video channel, whatever's on that video channel that has the higher luminance, which kind of enhances the resolution, that's going to allow the viewer to be able to kind of have a better idea of what's going on. So again, so we're utilizing two different channels of video. It's the same video. What we've done is just simply modify the luminance level on one of the channels of the video, but it's the same video shot. And then we've kind of used this oval. That's nothing but a, it looks like an oval circle, and it is, but it's really just a transition. And so instead of kind of using this wipe, as it were, to go from one video level or to another, or one video shot to another, we're simply kind of using this oval transition to be able to highlight that space, to highlight that area of the video frame where supposedly we could see the young man holding the gun. So again, we call this a highlighting situation, and it's something that you have to learn how to do in order certainly to be able to be a news editor.
You have to look carefully, but it appears to show a man, seen here, raising a weapon toward the officer. Police say the officer fired in response, and the mayor of Berkeley backed up that account.
The video shows.
Now here I'm pausing it because obviously this is a sound bite, and a sound bite is a type of actuality. You notice that was one of the concepts that we were talking about in today's lecture. So when you're isolating sound bites, and this is something that you'll kind of get used to doing, you really want to be able to quickly discern or pick up on the in cue, okay. And so what was the in cue for the mayor here? The in cue. What was his in cue? His in cue was the video shows. That would be his in cue. So when you're creating your script and you've watched the video, now you're the reporter and you're going to give this script to an editor in order to to put together the package. What are you going to designate on your script? The in cue for that particular soundbite, which is the video show. See, I just listened to it. I automatically kind of was able to kind of remember what the in cue was. You get used to doing that. That's a skill that you acquire. It has to be part of your repertoire as being a digital journalist.
The deceased pointed a gun that has been recovered.
The protest took a turn towards violence.
Remember that video that that I said that that showed that there was perhaps some looting going on, but it didn't have for some reason the audio had dropped out, and that happens a lot sometimes as a result of jostling the camera. As you're moving around, you kind of slightly disconnect the cable, and that drop your mic is disconnected, and you lose your audio on the recording. But what did I do?
A Quick Trip convenience store was vandalized. Police cars were damaged and...
What did I do? I transposed the audio. I took audio from another part of the raw feed of that utilitarian feed sequence that we got that allowed me to be able to access all of the video. And I took audio from another part of that situation, which same ambience basically. It was all taking place in that same general area. And then I transposed it under this shot where there was no video, and that's perfectly legal, if you will, to do. I'm not cheating or is it a manipulation? Yes, but it's an honest manipulation. It's just part of us trying to present the story. We're not trying to change your attitude about anything or trying to change your idea or what you feel about this particular story. I'm simply enhancing the storytelling by transposing the audio. So again, that's something that you should feel pretty comfortable doing.
Police cars were damaged and 2 officers suffered injuries.
So there are no winners here. There are nothing but losers.
Emotions were already raw. The shooting happened just a few miles from Ferguson, Missouri, where Michael Brown...
So here, again, we're talking about your repertoire, developing your repertoire. This is another situation. We call this a composite. So there on the left, you've got a still shot. It looks like it was just a freeze frame. That was the officer in the Ferguson, Missouri situation. And of course, that's Donald Brown. That's Mr. Brown. He was the one that was shot by that police officer. So that looks like a family photo. And again, so this is a composite shot. We wanted to feature, we were talking about these 2 individuals, and so we wanted to feature video of them in the same frame. And what are we doing? And then we're showing it that story is kind of taking place in the context of this story that we're presenting now. And so we're using this composite. So you have to learn how to use create a composite. So how many different channels of video is in this composite? There are exactly 3 channels of video in this composite. We've just taken a freeze frame from the back, from the you know, the back. That background is a freeze frame from what's going on in this particular night, which is December 24th. And then you know, that's the background, and so that's one channel of video. And then the police officer, that's another channel of video, and then Donald, that's another channel of video. So again, we're using 3 channels of video. You know, we place obviously each different video source or video shot on a different video channel on our nonlinear edit system, and then we use a filter or an enabler to allow us to be able to see all 3. You know, it's basically a picture-in-picture to be able to see all 3 of the frames, you know, in the same space, as it were, and that's a composite. Of course, you'll notice that the 2 photos, they kind of have, there's some dimensionality to them. Again, there's some going on the Z axis. You know, they look like they're kind of diagonal, if you will, going into the frame. And that's called a 3D effect, meaning that we're using the 3D mode of this particular edit or effects palette in order to achieve that sense of depth. And so that it's not so just totally 2-dimensional. A lot of times, you know, you don't have time to work with the 3D thing, which is a little more complex from the standpoint of your protocols. And so you'll simply do it in a 2-dimensional fashion. If you have the time, if you know how to go about using the 3D protocols, by all means, use the 3D protocols in order to create that sense of depth in terms of what would normally be a very 2-dimensional frame. So again, this is called a composite shot.
An unarmed black 18-year-old was fatally wounded by a white officer in August. A woman in the crowd identified herself as the victim's mother.
Now here, as you heard the reporter, Susan, was when we transitioned to this shot, she was she's basically setting up a soundbite, because this is the unfortunate mother of the young man who was killed that night. And again, so what happened here, I could have used a cutaway, and we're going to be talking about cutaways, or I could have, you know, if I had in order to be able to go to her soundbite. I didn't have a cutaway, and so I started on, when Susan started talking about the woman, the mother, I just kind of started, this is actually a part of the interview that they did on camera with her. I simply used that portion of the interview that we weren't going to feature in the soundbite. I simply used that as a setup shot. But now, when I actually wanted to go to the actual portion of the interview that we wanted to feature in the soundbite, when I put those two shots together, what am I going to get? I'm going to get a jump cut. And so how did I try to distract the audience or the viewer from the fact that there was a jump cut there? By using this flare sequence or this flare effect to kind of, cover the jump cut. That is something that you can do. Or you can also do a back time where I could have simply gone, kind of backed off what our selected audio in cue was going to be. And then when Susan finished her track, the mother's soundbite would have automatically come up. There would have been no jump cut. It would have just been a continuous, sequence. So that's called a back end, and we'll be talking about back ends in another lecture.
They won't tell me nothing. They won't even let me see my face.
So I'm gonna show you her stand up in a second. But again, so you can't view this story, even albeit being almost 6 years old, and not come away with some type of emotional or intellectual, or indeed, hopefully, ideally, a combination of an emotional and intellectual response. That's what we do in media. That's why we're here. That's why we're professionals, is to be able to elicit that type of experience from a viewer, from an audience. And why do we do that? Well, when we look at our society, and again, certainly from standpoint of America or the United States, we have a judicial branch, we have a legislative branch, and we have an executive branch, for what it's worth. We're certainly having problems with all three of those now. But we also have what's known as the fourth estate. And what is the fourth estate? The fourth estate is the media. And why do we have a media? Not just in terms of from an entertainment standpoint, but even though news can be certainly and should be entertaining as well as informative. But again, more importantly, we have news, and that's what we do. That's a lot of what you're going to do in terms of your careers is to provide. You're going to be digital journalists. You're providing information to your fellow countrymen, to your fellow citizens. And why are you providing as journalists? Why are you providing information to your fellow countrymen so that they can do what? Make informed decisions. And we know in this era of fake news and all of that kind of nonsense, we know that is one of the most dangerous things you can do in terms of a complex, society that happens to want to kind of characterize itself as a democracy, certainly, is to start saying that the information that you're trying to absorb, the information that you're trying to process or digest, I should say, is not factual, is not real. And then you don't know what to believe. Therefore, you don't know who to vote for, you don't know what to stand for, because you're not being given factual information. And so it kind of gives you an idea of how important journalism is, how important presenting factual information to an audience is in a democracy, quite frankly, in any society, in terms of trying to, coexist, in terms of trying to live together. It's very important. So that was the body of this package. This was the poor mother who obviously had just lost her son. And we see this kind of play out over and over again over the years. This was 2014. We had the incident with Mr. Brown just a few months before that. Here we are in 2020 with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor in Georgia and in Kentucky. And so what is that? Ain't nothing changed. I mean, that situation still goes on. It means that your responsibility as journalists and as media professionals is ever more important. It's more important now than it has ever been. So here we come up to the
officer, a 6-year veteran, is on administrative leave now. The police say he was given a body camera to wear but didn't have it on him at the time of the shooting. Susan Twaley, ABC News, Washington. So
a stand-up is the summation of the previous package that you just witnessed, and so she, in her stand-up, again, this is Susan Twaley, she should be summing up what she has just previously reported. You're not supposed to get any new information in a stand-up, but over the last 20 years or so, a younger generation of television journalists have started kind of allowing more information in their stand-up close. But again, a stand-up close should be the summation of the previous report that you just viewed. So class, that's it for today's lecture. Again, if you have any questions, by all means, contact me, text me, call me. If you're going to call me, text me first, and that way we can set up a phone conversation, or you can certainly email me. Next week we'll be talking about cutaways and what happens when you put two pieces of video together. You basically get a jump cut, and how do you distract the viewer or the audience from the standpoint from the fact that you actually have that you presented a jump cut by using a cutaway. And so I like to say that a cutaway is your friend, and so we'll be talking about that next week. So stay safe, and I'll see you next week.